emails. These are then picked up by a Lambda function, and this is the first real workhorse of the IDS. It parses the emails into three parts. You have your attachments, and then you have your headers and your bodies. And these all get dropped into separate S3 buckets where they're then analyzed in parallel. We're going to go now into each one of these legs really quick. So for the attachments, once these are picked up, we have a Lambda function which then goes and it submits them to a bunch of static analysis services as well as dynamic sandboxes. These then all alert asynchronously back down to our alert console or our Phantom Enterprise application. We also look at headers. Here we look for things like the sending servers, as well as SPF, DKIM checks, and we look for people spoofing emails. We also do several other checks for X headers, stuff like that. The most important part about our headers is we actually log all of these to an Elasticsearch instance. We use this for contextualization throughout the hit. We'll see how that plays in later, but that's a really useful tool because it basically lets us say, hey, any infection or URL or attachment, how did it get into our environment? Did it come from the email layer, which is an important question you want to ask, right? How was I compromised? What was the initial vector? And then we also do body analysis. Here we're looking at things like natural language processing as well as exploding URLs and links. And then we use vendors who are really good at looking at like ad hominem domains or newly registered domains or the passive DNS on a bunch of IP addresses we're seeing traffic from. So, and then there's one more component which is missing here, which is a memcache server, and we use that to deduplicate rapid events. So all of this goes down to that Phantom Analyst console that I was telling you about. And the real power there is we actually normalize all of the data going into Phantom. So it all comes in as this Ceph model, which is a common event format. And once it's in that common event format, we can run these Python playbooks on it programmatically. So we can say, hey, if you ever saw a file hash, make sure you check the whole fleet and say, was that file on any of our endpoints? And then give us that impact analysis. How many of these people downloaded that? What's really nice is we've integrated this to our email IDS. So we can say, hey, you got that binary. That binary came through the email layer. You may see 4 of them on your fleet, but 10 people actually received that email containing that binary. And then again, it lets us take these programmatic actions on those alerts. So we can then go tag those emails. We can quarantine those binaries and even quarantine those servers if we need to. This is an image of a Lambda Debug Log. This is really the workhorse of our email IDS. This is where we're processing email in high concurrency and parallel. Here you see 3 different emails being parsed in what looks like 2 seconds. And this is really, like I was saying, the meat and potatoes of the IDS. If you've never used AWS Lambda, it's really nice. You can basically just write code and deploy it, and then it does the auto scaling. But what is really difficult with this is that you can't get a sense of holistically how is my IDS functioning. If you were to try and look at these debug logs for errors, you'd go snowblind really quick because there's just too much detail here. So we get another really nice feature automatically with AWS, and that's CloudWatch metrics. So we use CloudWatch metrics all throughout the IDS as a sense to get like a holistic performance of our IDS. How is it performing? Again, this has a high watermark of up to like 60,000 emails an hour, so it's highly concurrent, and if it's choking on any one thing, we really need to understand those errors and then work them out of the system. Again, this is really important for us because we're a global company, tons of people speaking different languages all over the world, sending email 24/7. So if our email IDS is choking at 3 a.m. on some foreign language, we need to know because then we can go and address those problems. So we have to have those alerts just around performance and make sure our tools are functioning right. Another really nice, almost automatic feature out of AWS that we use are these Elasticsearch headers. We use these programmatically with our backend, so that way they can go and they can compare campaigns. They can say, hey, we got this one attachment from this sender, but then it also came from all these other senders. So we can do like really nice campaign analysis. But here you're seeing the Kibana front end on top of Elasticsearch, and this is just nice for hunting. This is another nice analyst tool where we can go and look up and say, hey, show me all those sending servers during this one period of time, and then we can understand, was that compromised? Were those different sending servers sending the same attachment, perhaps part of a botnet? Is this a related campaign? So again, this is a really nice analyst tool that kind of comes with it. So what we're seeing here is that Phantom application backend. Basically, we get all of these normalized alerts, and then they go to this single pane of glass, and then we can have people do hit review and look at these alerts and say, initiate some type of manual action. So what we're looking at here is actually a dynamic malware analysis alert. So we had a sandbox trip on a piece of malware, and it's saying, it's just bringing the alert. And what the analyst gets, or the engineer, whoever's looking at this alert, what they get automatically is tons of enrichment and context around this hit. So we can see right away, we have reversing labs results, we have virus total results, we have custom Uber widgets, which tell us how many times we've ever seen this file before. We have our dynamic sandbox results. We have endpoint agents, which tell us, this file has never hit the fleet. And then we even built a custom widget for our email IDS. So, this tells us this email came through the email layer. We have 2 recipients that received this. This is the time they received it and who it would have been from. So that's extremely helpful when you're just trying to get an eyeball view of the problem. Hey, I have this, piece of malware in my fleet. Where did it come from? Not only that, but then we have the playbooks which go look up that alert in the Elasticsearch and then reach back to that S3 container, grabbing that raw email and attaching it to the hit. This is extremely useful for an analyst because then they can look at this raw email and say, was this a phish? Was this not a phish? Now, that creates a myriad of problems because you could still have malware and not necessarily a phish. But that's really important information to understand because that means, maybe your third-party vendor, whoever you're working with, isn't trying to phish you, but they've been compromised. Then we can also take user-guided actions from Phantom. So here's a user taking that email. This is actually an email that came in through our phishing queue. And they're taking that email and then they're deleting it for this one user. We've redacted the users for our own privacy. But in this case, they're able to delete the email from that user's inbox. We also run our own planned phishing assessments to help raise user awareness and user education. This is one we had actually run a while back, but in this case, we had gone back, and now we have the ability to programmatically tag all of these emails that came through our IDS with phishing labels. This is really nice because this actually moves it out of the user's inbox into another separate email container labeled phishing. So let's say the IDS false positive, we're not deleting people's email, but we're at least containing it and letting them know we programmatically detected this may be a phishing attack. Not only do we have these alerts in our analyst console, but we need to receive them real time. My team is a heavy user of chat ops. We really kind of believe in that methodology. We live in our chat consoles, but then we also do a lot of analysis and programmatic actions right from chat. So what we're seeing here is Phantom actually alerted our chat that we got a display name phish. For those of you that are unaware, display name phishes are when somebody registers a legitimate common email address, such as Gmail or Hotmail, but then they set their username or their common name as an executive or somebody in your company that's really important, and then they just try to social engineer somebody into giving them something. This is an extremely powerful tactic because it's hard to identify because it relies on just social engineering tactics. So in this case, we're in chat, we get this high severity alert, and we can instantly just click the alert, it launches our console, and then boom, there's the email attached right to the alert. So now I just went from chat to triaging this in seconds, and I can quickly tell this is a false positive. So that was easy to whitelist. But this is actually an example of a true positive. So here we have somebody impersonating Travis Kalanick, who is the CEO of Uber, in the news all the time, very popular guy. And here's a fake email address somebody registered for him, and then they're emailing somebody in the company, and they're saying, hey, can you provide those W-2s? In this case, we were able to respond so real time and rapidly to this that we were able to call the recipient of this email within minutes of them receiving it. Not only did we delete it, but then we just made sure they didn't act on this. So those are some of the things and how we respond to this. But then we also see phish that we haven't planned for, that we don't have rules for in our IDS.
immediately. And these often get reported to us by just savvy engineers, savvy people like yourself working in the company that say, I think you guys should be aware of this. So what we do there is we go and we review these, every few weeks, and we make sure that we can then see these in the IDS moving forward. This is, your classic hunting and then writing signatures, your bread and butter of really detection and response. So here we had an email that came in through our phishing queue, and this was really easy to write a rule on because our email IDS already parses all of this information, so we can already programmatically say, oh, the hyperlink in that DOM, right? So here we have a HTML hyperlink, and the actual link itself points to a different URL than the display of the hyperlink. All you have to do is check the protocol, make sure it's a full URL and it's a different domain, and that's a really easy alert that you can prevent your people from ever seeing. This is another one where we went back and we hunted, and we have this Google Apps layer, and we're like, this Gmail layer should really be preventing us from receiving all of this spam and stuff. But we ended up getting these messages anyway, which still contained these phishing links. So we then added the parsing of these hello servers and these received by servers to our IDS, and then we were able to harness all of these other intelligence services that we were already using across the organization and reuse that value in our IDS just by parsing another field of the protocol. So again, we had this few $100,000 expensive Blinky box, and we got so much more power out of just rewriting these tools and parsing the basic structures ourselves and then just reusing these other intelligence services we already had versus having all of this siloed equipment. We also set up some advanced intelligence services. So what you're seeing is an example here where we were able to basically detect people standing up new phishing sites against us, and then we could actually see the victims falling for these sites near real time. This is pretty huge because it lets us get in front of ATO'd accounts. We can understand when our victims have had their or when our victims of our application have had their credentials stolen, but before the accounts are actually taken over, which is huge from a risk and a fraud prevention point of view. It's also allowed us to attack the phishers in a way. So here we see an example of a website which was running WordPress and then was compromised. We could then brute force the extensions on this one part of the URI, and we're actually able to get the phishing kit itself. Once we got the phishing kit from these sites, we were able to deobfuscate those and pull out who was receiving all of this phishing intelligence. And then not only were we able to defamate that email, that domain, all of that stuff, submit it for takedown, but then we could also look up those people in our own system, quantify potentially how much they have gained, and then work with investigations to take those people to law enforcement. So a quick review, basically, if you take the extra time to parse the protocols yourself and write the alerts yourself, you suddenly get much more value because you're able to write these rules on the fly versus just trusting what some box tells you is bad, which is awesome because then we can stay very current on attacker trends and attacker technologies, and we can add new rules to catch those campaigns in the wild as they're targeting us. Also, it lets us reuse value. So I was talking about those intelligence services. We have an Intel arm to our organization, and they already pay for a lot of these services. So rather than paying, another $100,000 for one of these boxes, we're able to reuse all that value we already have and apply it to our IDS. And then the integrations is massive. Having the ability to go back and white label stuff or delete it is huge, as well as just see, did it come through this vector? Is this how I was compromised? And that's it. Any questions?
Yes. Will this presentation be available anywhere for us to see?
Yeah, the presentations are going to get released later this week, and then we're also planning on open sourcing this project. There's two major milestones until we can open source this. Right now, we're working on decoupling the rules from the actual infrastructure, so then people can also share email and phishing rules for current campaigns, which will be nice. And then we also want to terraform the whole thing, much like Stream Alert, so it's easy to deploy for anybody else. Question?
I was wondering how you store sensitive data in your IDS, like say if you have sensitive data in your emails.
Right. The question is, how do we store sensitive data? I can't go into 100% of our details, but we have numerous controls. We've had the controls reviewed by sister groups in the organization, and I can tell you that no human, like I can't go access any raw email. Only the programmatic systems can do that and then attach it to the things. So I don't even have that access. And not only did I take that access away from myself and like the whole team, but we wrote alerts on the controls for people to get that access. So if anybody were to change those controls, we would be alerted real time. Right. So in that regard, do we actually strip some of the content from the email so that the analyst only gets some of the content? The analyst is only getting the content relevant to the alert. So they're only receiving that one email relevant to the alert. And then on top of that, like I was saying, those can only be accessed programmatically from automated systems.
But what about like false positives where you're actually having sensitive data in that email, but it's a false positive so that when the analyst reviews it, it's actually sensitive information that you actually see that?
The question was, how do we deal with an analyst coming across the sensitive details in the specific email? I haven't necessarily seen that exact case, but usually in those cases, we whitelist whatever that content was, so we will never see it again. We do that with almost all of our false positives, just as a good sense of IDS hygiene, so that way it doesn't keep showing up and we don't have a lot of noise. Question? Right now we're doing ourselves, and it's very simple Bayesian classifiers. It's nothing advanced, but that is something that I would like. Again, like I just want to be able to parse the bodies and then hopefully look towards a third party that specializes in that kind of stuff. Like again, with the URLs, we don't write so many alerts on the URLs, but we look towards vendors that specialize in like ad hominem domains or newly registered domains. So right now, that stuff's kind of proof of concept, but I'll be looking towards integrations in the future. Another question?
Where will the slides be posted online?
I'm not 100% where the slides will be posted online, but I'll work with BSides to make sure that happens. Thank you, guys. I'm going to take the rest of the questions offline.
Thank you, Dan. On behalf of BSidesSF and Fitbit, we'd like to present you with this gift. Thanks so much for your contribution.
Thank you.
And to everybody, please feel free to submit your feedback and questions online. Thanks.